Welcome to HOA Story Speaker, your daily destination for powerful, shocking, and real-life inspired HOA stories.
They slapped handcuffs on my 78-year-old father. Two armed security guards marched him off the 2,300 acres with a private lake I had just inherited, all because he walked down to the fishing dock his own grandfather built back in 1923. My dad has lived on this land his entire life. He taught half the neighborhood kids how to fish on that lake. Never caused trouble. Never raised his voice. Then Bethany Cromwell arrived, a lawyer from California who became HOA president after barely 6 months. She stood there and declared, "The lake now belongs to the community." She had a harmless old man arrested in front of people he'd known for decades, all to grab land that existed 50 years before she did. I watched the cuffs lock around his trembling wrists, heard the metal snap echo across the water, and I knew in that moment they'd picked the wrong family. The very next morning, every faucet in their neighborhood ran bone dry. What would you do if a power-hungry outsider tried to steal your inheritance? Where are you watching from? Drop your location and your ultimate revenge idea below. But let me rewind and explain how this all started. My name is Jackson Ridge. I'm 45 years old, and I just inherited one of the most beautiful pieces of land in Virginia. 2,300 acres of rolling hills, untouched forest, and a crystal-clear 40-acre lake that's been in my family since Calvin Coolidge was president. My grandfather, Earl Ridge, bought the property in 1923 for $800 cash. Even today, the dusty smell of courthouse records takes me back to researching those original deeds. Earl spent 3 years digging channels by hand, stacking stone retaining walls, and shaping what became Lake Serenity, a fishing paradise that drew families from 3 counties away. After Earl passed, my father Harlan Ridge worked this land for 50 years. He never charged anyone a dime to fish, swim, or picnic. The laughter of children bouncing across the water became the sound of our summers. Dad always said, "Good neighbors make good communities." I spent 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers before coming home last year when Dad decided to retire. He officially transferred the land to me but kept living in the old homestead. At 78, the man still has more energy than people half his age. In 2019, a California development company bought the land next to ours and built Willowbrook Estates, 847 luxury homes marketed as exclusive lakefront living. Their sales brochures actually used photos of our lake, promising residents access to pristine waterfront amenities. For 4 years, everything stayed peaceful. Then 6 months ago, new HOA elections brought in Bethany Cromwell as president. She's a real estate attorney from Orange County, drives a Tesla with custom plates, and apparently decided small-town Virginia needed California-style property optimization. Her first move was showing up at our door with a stack of legal papers, her heavy perfume mixing with the crisp morning air. "Mr. Ridge," she said to Dad in a syrupy voice, "I'm here to discuss our little access issue." Her proposal was simple. Pay the HOA $50,000 as a one-time community impact fee, plus $500 a month in maintenance, or lose all lake access forever. She cited some obscure county ordinance about public waterways to justify it. Dad calmly explained that our land predated their development by nearly a century and maybe there was a fair solution that didn't involve extortion. That's when her smile vanished. "Sir, you don't understand modern property law," she snapped. "Times have changed. You need to change with them." The crunch of gravel under her designer heels as she walked back to her Tesla sounded like a warning. 2 days later she escalated. A county inspector showed up after anonymous environmental complaints. Found nothing of course, but the harassment had begun. That week, Dad started having chest pains. Stress, the doctor said. This woman was literally making my father sick with paperwork. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago at the HOA meeting. Dad went hoping for reason. Instead, Bethany humiliated him in front of 200 neighbors. "Mr. Ridge is hoarding community resources," she announced. "Elderly residents who can't adapt to changing standards might be happier in assisted living." The room went silent. She just told a beloved 78-year-old to go die in a nursing home. I felt bow rise as I watched Dad's face collapse. And she wasn't finished. She warned that our property posed ongoing safety risks and that the HOA was exploring all legal options. That night, Dad couldn't sleep. I found him sitting on the dock at 3 in the morning, staring at water his grandfather built with bare hands. "She's going to take it all, isn't she?" he asked. That's when I realized this wasn't a neighbor dispute anymore. Bethany Cromwell had declared war. The next morning she filed an emergency injunction claiming our lake was a community asset withheld from public use. She even argued that because residents had used it for 4 years, they had adverse possession rights. My Army Corps training kicked in. Letting people use land without documentation can cost you everything. Dad's old handshake agreements suddenly looked dangerous. 3 days later, she brought in a shady surveyor who magically discovered that our lake extended into HOA easements. I watched them hammer new stakes into our shoreline, the metal ringing across water that had been ours for a century. Diesel fumes mixed with lake mist, a perfect symbol of what she was doing to our home. The survey ignored the natural spring system feeding the lake. Accuracy didn't matter. Ammunition did. Then she went nuclear, holding a press conference on our own beach, inviting reporters to watch her accuse an elderly hoarder of environmental crimes. Folding chairs sat where kids once played. It was like a thief hosting a press event in your living room. Things changed while I was researching our defense at the courthouse. I overheard Bethany in the parking lot, whispering behind her Tesla. "The environmental angle isn't fast enough," she hissed. "I need the lake drained and ready for construction by spring." My blood froze. She'd already taken developer money to turn our century-old ecosystem into a golf course. "The old man's practically dead anyway," she added. "Stress will finish him." That wasn't legal pressure anymore. That was attempted murder by paperwork. While she played games, I studied infrastructure. Water systems are chessboards. Control the source and you control everything. Our lake feeds aquifers under every Willowbrook home. Cut the spring and 847 houses lose water within hours. That night, Dad and I walked the old stone channels by flashlight, leaves crunching under our boots like childhood memories. "Your grandfather built the valley's lifeline," I told him. Dad smiled for the first time in weeks. "Water flows to those who understand it," he said. The next morning, Bethany overplayed her hand with a bogus nuisance declaration pushing eminent domain. Reading it, I smiled. Every illegal move was evidence. I poured Dad coffee and said, "I think it's time we remind her where her water comes from." The birds over Lake Serenity had never sounded sweeter. Bethany didn't back down. She launched petitions, smear campaigns, and fake violations, painting me as a dangerous veteran. While she spread lies, I built allies. The HOA maintenance manager spilled everything over greasy diner coffee. She was extorting seniors, targeting critics, and tied to the same mortgage company funding the golf course. At the city council meeting, her polished lies started to crack. Quietly, residents approached me afterward. They didn't want this war. They wanted peace. Bethany mistook fear for loyalty. Desperate, she filed an EPA complaint, then staged an environmental crime. I watched her consultant dump motor oil by our lake just minutes before the news arrived. Cameras rolled as she pointed dramatically at the mess. "This is the negligence threatening our community," she declared. Watching someone poison what they claimed to protect was sickening. And that was the moment I knew she'd finally gone too far. That night's headline hit me like a punch to the chest. Local family's environmental negligence threatens community water supply. The broadcast looped the same dramatic shots again and again. An oil sheen on the water, Bethy's rehearsed tears about protecting children, and not a single moment spent asking where that oil had actually come from. But there's one advantage to going up against someone when you've spent 20 years in the Army Corps. You learn to document everything. While Bethany played victim for the cameras, I was standing in my bedroom window photographing her so-called environmental consultant with military-grade optics. License plates. Time stamps. Even the quick lube receipt sticking out of his pocket like a signed confession. Within 48 hours, I'd reached out to Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a nationally respected water quality expert who'd testified before Congress. As news crews filmed, she took independent samples from the lake, her professional equipment making Bethy's bargain bin test kits look like a kid's science fair toy. The results destroyed the narrative instantly. Lake Serenity had the cleanest water in the county, cleaner than municipal supplies, with mineral signatures proving it came from natural springs. The oil was fresh 10W30, barely weathered, clearly dumped just hours before it was discovered. The final blow came from invoices Cisco photographed inside Bethy's Tesla. Her environmental consultant was actually her lawn service contractor, paid $500 in cash to dump oil and pretend to be a scientist on camera. Environmental fraud carries a 5-year federal prison sentence, a detail Bethy must have missed in law school. Local media retracted the story after Dr. Martinez publicly confirmed the evidence had been planted. Watching Bethy's face during the follow-up interview was better than Christmas morning. She looked like she'd swallowed a live hornet, stumbling through excuses about unknown contamination sources while the cameras caught every lie. That was when the community finally started waking up to the monster they'd elected. Martha Henley called an informal meeting at the community center to discuss concerns about HOA leadership. 57 residents showed up, a massive turnout for Willowbrook. The stories poured out: harassment, financial abuse, intimidation. Cisco revealed that Bethany had diverted $180,000 from pool maintenance to pay private attorneys and fake consultants. She'd been bleeding community funds to fuel a personal vendetta against our family. Several military veterans quietly closed ranks around us. Men who'd served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, they recognized authoritarian tactics instantly. That brotherhood felt like armor against Bethy's psychological warfare. But facing criminal exposure and open revolt, Bethany made the desperate move of someone with nothing left to lose. She filed a restraining order against Dad, claiming he'd made threatening gestures during a random post office encounter. It was absurd. Dad had simply nodded politely like he always did. But she achieved her real goal, portraying a 78-year-old man as a danger needing court protection. The hearing was set for Monday. If granted, Dad would be legally barred from half the county, including access to his own lakefront. She was trying to exile him from land his grandfather had bought outright a century earlier. That night, Dad and I sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the lake in gold and crimson. The calm water mocked the legal chaos closing in on us. "She's scared now," Dad said quietly, casting his line. "Desperate people do desperate things. Your grandfather used to say cornered rattlesnakes strike the wildest." He was right. Every escalation exposed Bethy's growing panic. And I knew her next move would be uglier still. While organizing paperwork for the hearing, I found something that changed everything. Tucked beneath decades of fishing licenses was a manila envelope labeled emergency use only in my grandfather Earl's shaky handwriting. Inside was the original 1923 water rights agreement, not just our deed, but a separate document I'd never known existed. The yellowed pages crackled like dry leaves, releasing that old courthouse smell that had become my unwanted soundtrack. This wasn't ordinary paperwork. It was a perpetual easement granting the Ridge family exclusive authority to regulate, redirect, or restrict all water sources within a 5-mile radius of the spring system. The language was ironclad, predating zoning laws and every HOA covenant by decades. A handwritten note was clipped to it. "In case someone tries to steal what we built, the master valve is behind the lightning split oak, 30 paces from the stone bridge. Emergency use only. This power carries responsibility. P.S. Don't tell your grandmother unless absolutely necessary. She worries. Even in crisis, Earl protected family peace." I called Dad immediately. "Did you know about this valve?" His chuckle crackled through the phone. "Your grandfather was thorough. He figured someone might try taking what we created. That agreement meant we controlled every drop of water feeding the valley. Every well. Every home. Every business. We didn't just own Lake Serenity, we controlled the region's lifeline." Things got even darker when records showed Bethany had personally guaranteed the HOA's legal fees through her private practice. If she lost, her personal assets were exposed. She wasn't fighting for the community, she was fighting bankruptcy. Developers had already paid her $200,000 for lake property she didn't own. Every escalation was financial self-preservation. That afternoon, I hiked to the lightning split oak and found the stone chamber Earl had built. Inside was the master valve, a gravity-fed system capable of redirecting the entire aquifer with a single iron wheel. I turned it carefully, feeling rust give way to smooth metal. Water levels shifted within minutes. Legal control was one thing. Physical control was another. But that power came with a weight I didn't expect. Using it would affect innocent families, kids, seniors, people who never wanted this fight. The responsibility felt like holding a live grenade. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Dad met me at the kitchen door. "Found it, didn't you?" I nodded. "Your grandfather said real power isn't what you can do, it's knowing when not to. But sometimes evil needs consequences." He was right. Bethany had declared war and we held the final card. Sleep didn't come that night. By dawn, I had a plan. No innocent harm, maximum impact on the guilty, airtight legality. I installed trail cameras around the valve system, 20 years of military planning guiding every angle. If Bethany tried sabotage, I wanted proof. At Murphy's Diner, burnt coffee kept me sharp as civil rights attorney Marcus Webb spread our documents across the table. "These water rights are basically constitutional law," he said. "HOAs can't touch this. And if she's embezzling and filing false reports, that's federal racketeering." While Marcus prepared legal firepower, we gathered community intelligence. Cisco documented illegal fines and threats. Martha organized safe spaces for neighbors to speak. The stories were horrifying: elderly residents threatened with foreclosure, families fined over chalk drawings. Bethany was punishing children for being children. Dr. Martinez agreed to conduct a full study proving our stewardship had preserved an environmental treasure. Earl had even built humanitarian safeguards into the system, emergency channels beyond our control. We planned a public demonstration with surgical precision. Education, not punishment. Let Bethany announce victory before revealing who truly controlled the water. Dad insisted on attending, oxygen tank and all. "I want to see her face," he said. As Friday approached, Bethany panicked. Monday morning, private security showed up at our gate in tactical gear. That afternoon, flyers circulated with my military photo, warning of PTSD-induced violence. After 20 years of service, I was being painted as a threat. Anonymous calls to protective services followed. Watching Dad humiliated nearly broke me. But paranoia backfired. Cisco uncovered secret negotiations to sell HOA land to developers. The community snapped. Over 300 signatures triggered a recall election. Bethany responded with lawsuits and intimidation. Her biggest mistake was targeting veterans. Word spread fast, and the response was only beginning. They knew oppression the moment it showed its face, whether it wore the uniform of a foreign regime or hid behind the clipboard of a suburban HOA. By Wednesday night, Colonel James Morrison, my former commanding officer, rolled into our driveway in his growling diesel truck. The sound felt like cavalry horns echoing through a besieged fortress. "Heard you're dealing with a local warlord," he said, gripping my hand with the steady strength of a man who'd led troops through real combat. "Figured you might want backup at your community meeting." By Thursday, 15 veterans had confirmed they'd be there, not to threaten anyone, but to make it clear that going after one veteran meant standing against the whole brotherhood. The effect was immediate. Bethany's security team grew visibly uneasy as military plates began appearing all over town. That same Thursday evening, she launched a final, frantic maneuver, filing for an emergency restraining order against both my father and me, accusing us of plotting domestic terrorism involving critical infrastructure. She seriously argued that our privately managed water system was a weapon of mass destruction. The paperwork arrived via a shaky process server who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but our property. The order claimed that due to alleged threats involving water manipulation, we were barred from accessing or operating any water controls pending investigation. As I read it, the realization hit me hard. Bethany had learned about our master valve system. Whether through spying, leaks, or sheer legal paranoia, she knew we controlled Willowbrook's water and was scrambling to shut that advantage down before Friday. But she'd overlooked one vital detail. Restraining orders don't apply until they're officially served and processed. That gave us 18 uninterrupted hours. More than enough time to make a point about who truly controlled the water running through her prized development. Dad laughed when I explained it. "Your grandfather always said the smartest lawyers often outthink themselves." Bethany had just beaten herself at her own game. In trying to stop our demonstration, she'd effectively admitted we had the power to cut off the entire community's water. Overnight, the upcoming meeting transformed from a neighborhood squabble into a public lesson on water rights. The irony was rich. She'd spent months claiming we endangered the water supply, and now she'd legally confirmed we controlled it. Friday morning arrived with that sharp autumn chill that makes you believe justice still exists. But Bethany wasn't done fighting. Her first move was trying to have me arrested on fabricated assault charges. At 7 a.m., 2 deputies showed up with a warrant based on her sworn claim that I'd threatened her with military-grade weapons at a gas station encounter that never occurred. She'd invented a crime scene, complete with fake witness statements from her guards. Unfortunately for her, gas station cameras told the real story. I was filling my truck while she sat in her Tesla 30 feet away, never even approaching me. The deputies left apologizing, their expressions clearly questioning her credibility. Nothing dismantles a lie faster than video proof. But that was only her opening shot. By noon, she escalated to outright community extortion. Every Willowbrook household received certified letters demanding an immediate $5,000 emergency assessment or face foreclosure. The timing was deliberate. She wanted to turn the neighborhood against us by triggering financial panic. Fear and anger hung heavy as residents clustered together, clutching those letters like death warrants. Martha Henley called me sobbing, explaining her fixed Social Security income couldn't cover anything close to that amount. 3 other elderly residents faced the same impossible choice between ruin and homelessness. Meanwhile, Cisco uncovered Bethany's darkest secret yet. Bank records showed she'd siphoned nearly $200,000 from HOA accounts over 6 months. She'd been funding her personal war against us with community money. When Marcus Webb reviewed the evidence, his eyes lit up. This wasn't just embezzlement anymore, he explained over lunch at Murphy's Diner, the vinyl booth creaking beneath us. She was running a criminal enterprise under the authority of the HOA. Federal racketeering charges could mean 20 years. But money wasn't her only weapon. That afternoon, word spread that she'd contacted Child Protective Services about 3 families who signed the recall petition, falsely claiming their kids were exposed to environmental hazards from our lake. Parents scrambled in panic as inspectors arrived, terrified that opposing the HOA president could cost them their children. The psychological warfare worked. Several supporters withdrew, too afraid to keep fighting. She turned agencies meant to protect families into tools of intimidation. By late afternoon, this had gone far beyond property disputes and into something resembling guerrilla warfare. Bethany hired more guards, 6 in total, to patrol Willowbrook and photograph anyone attending our meeting. Surveillance and intimidation became the norm, rivaling the tactics of the Stasi. Her most reckless move came at 4 p.m., filing an emergency court motion claiming our meeting itself was a terrorist threat against infrastructure. She argued that publicly discussing water rights constituted domestic terrorism. The FBI actually responded. Special Agent Rebecca Torres arrived, clearly annoyed to be dragged into HOA theatrics. After reviewing Bethany's so-called evidence, mostly screenshots of our meeting flyer, Agent Torres made it clear during a recorded call that organizing a community meeting wasn't terrorism, but filing false federal reports was a felony carrying prison time. Watching that scheme collapse felt sweeter than Dad's apple pie. But cornered animals are dangerous. 2 hours before the meeting, Bethany made her final move. She tried to drain Lake Serenity, hiring contractors to dig spillways that would redirect water off our land. I found them during my last patrol, engines idling, earth already torn up. She was prepared to destroy a century-old ecosystem just to win. That was the moment I knew she'd crossed from harassment into real crime. As I stood there watching men prepare to erase my grandfather's legacy, I decided the war ended tonight. The community center overflowed by 7 p.m., more than 250 people crammed inside, with crowds outside under floodlights. News crews lined up, officials filled the front row, and Bethany arrived late in a rented limousine wearing a designer suit and carrying a briefcase like a weapon. Her setup was lavish: screens, sound systems, stacks of documents, all paid for with stolen HOA funds. She began confidently, announcing the end of our family's so-called stranglehold on community resources. Renderings flashed of our lake replaced by a golf course and condos. The arrogance was staggering. She accused us of hoarding water and claimed collective need outweighed private rights. That's when I stood and asked to respond. Silence fell. Dad tightened his grip on his oxygen tank, eyes bright. I walked forward and calmly suggested the community first understand who truly controlled their water. I handed the original 1923 easement documents to the county attorney. After review, he confirmed their validity. Gasps rippled through the room as people realized every drop of water flowed through our land. Bethany's face drained of color. I called Cisco and had him slowly turn the master valve. Within minutes, phones buzzed with reports of no water pressure. Through the windows, her sprinklers sputtered and died. Then I restored the flow and explained the lesson. Respect water rights and everyone thrives. Dad then stood and delivered the line that would be quoted everywhere. You can't steal water from people who control the well. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Moments later, FBI agents entered with arrest warrants. Bethany was let out in cuffs as the crowd cheered. 6 months later, she was sentenced to prison and ordered to repay the community. Willowbrook recovered, reformed its HOA, and restored trust. Dad's health rebounded, the lake was protected, and our fight became a symbol. Sometimes the strongest defense isn't force, it's knowing exactly what you own and refusing to back down when bullies test the wrong family.